Is it difficult for you to remember the last time you were fully present? Hi, I'm your host, Danielle Zapchenk, and if you enjoy hearing other stories and want to be encouraged about the ways God is working in their life, you found a home right here at the Parable Podcast. Joining me today is podcast host and artist Heather Winchell, who reflects on a pivotal moment that encapsulated her desire to be fully present. Here's my conversation with Heather Winchell. I am thrilled to introduce you to Heather Winchell. Heather was connected through Every Little Seed magazine. Courtney Kendall, you heard her back on a previous episode. And so this is how we get to meet new friends. And so Heather, thank you so much for being with us today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
So Heather, when we think about like our senses of our body, touch, sound, scent, taste, I'm missing one, whatever that one is. Which of them would you be most sad to lose?
Ooh, that is a great question. Probably sight. I think it would break my heart to think that I could never see one of my boys smiling again.
Oh, yeah. It's really hard to pick one of them. I had done a message about scent a couple years ago at our church, and you just don't realize how much is connected to that. Like memories are connected to that. So yeah, sometimes I ask our kids, like, which one would you want to give up? But then you're like, oh, but then I couldn't do that. So it is beautiful how it is like a holistic part of us. God knew what he was doing, but yeah, that would be hard to get rid of sight. What 3 words would best describe either yourself or your family?
I'll go for my family. Okay. So my family consists of me, handsome man, that's what I call my husband, and then 4 boys. Okay. And
wow.
The boy ages are almost 4 up to 12. So loud, fun, feelers.
Yes. Okay. I would say our families would get along well. Interesting that you say, are you the feeler or all of you, even your boys, they have like deep feelings? Okay. Yep. I love that.
And we're a communicative family.
Yes. Okay. We would get along really well. I make our kids talk about emotions quite often. So like, this is super good. We'll be out there soon to meet you guys. All right. When you think of the word regret, does that make you think about a specific time in your life, or has regret been used in a way to grow from?
I mean, I think it definitely brings to mind specific seasons, but I think that the way the Lord has shepherded my heart, regret moves very quickly to lament, which moves towards hope for restoration.
Yeah, gosh, that's so good. I love that. You could write that on a shirt. Well, Heather, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're passionate about? You obviously have 4 boys that you are having a good time over there, but what really gets your heart beating?
You know, I'm a very excitable person. I'm a very enthusiastic person. So I also host a podcast. It's called Thanks for Doing That. And my title is Chief Enthusiast. And that is just, it really does capture how earnestly I get excited about things, about people, the things they do, the reasons they do it. I think that we are all given gifts to give and that showing up in those gifts matter. And I just get really excited to remind people of that and to herald that, to bring good news.
Yeah. We were going on a trip the other week with my girlfriends, and one of the friends had come over the night before. We were making breakfast. I really didn't think anything of it. And she's just like, oh, do you know how like special this is what you're doing right now? And I'm like, I didn't think anything of it. But what you said, like these gifts that each of one of us have, like sometimes we don't even recognize like it's anything out of the ordinary. We assume that everyone else has it, or this is not a really big deal. So I love that you are a chief enthusiast, and for yourself and like for the people around you. Would you always say that that's something that you've had since you were a little girl?
I do think that I've always been quick to get vision for things, excited about things. My joy is made more complete when I share it. And so if I'm excited about something, I have to talk about it. And I mean, that could be anything from like this beautiful creative thing something's doing to like a new pair of shoes. So yeah, I would say that's probably a pretty consistent way that I've shown up to the world.
you said you're a mom from 4 to, is it 12 or 14? Did you say?
12.
12. Yeah. So what is something that you love about that age dynamic? And then is there anything that is a challenge from 4 to 12?
I really appreciate the juxtaposition right now of just the delight it is to talk to my 12-year-old about really meaningful things. And then conversely, the delight it is to be hanging out with my almost 4-year-old and to have like everything in the world stop to see this bug, right? Like each are their own really unique delight. And I think that it's just a really beautiful thing to be able to hold both of those in the same day, in the same hour. So that's really cool. I think what's hard, I am just like so excited for the day when our whole family can get in the car and go somewhere and it's like a win for everybody. And I kind of feel like this is the season where we're almost there. We're a camping family. We enjoy playing outside. And I think this summer, with the youngest being 4.5, that will like feel like a win for everybody. We're not stopping for nap time and, things like that. Yeah. But it is hard to have such a widespread because family activities are just more dynamic, not quite as focused or as maybe easy to pull off.
Absolutely. Yeah. That makes perfect sense. Yeah. And you, depending on your season, you kind of like forget about that because either it's just, that's what you're just like trying to do and accomplish, just getting out the door every day. And then later on, you're just like, oh, remember when I needed to remind you to put shoes on? Like, right. You know how to do that now. So, well, thanks so much for sharing a little bit about yourself. This podcast is really about our stories and how God has really like helped us understand the lessons that he's taught us along the way. And like, we just don't even recognize things are happening in our life. And then we can look back on and say, oh, okay, like I see it now. So Heather, I'd love for you to share with us one of your parable stories.
I love the premise of that. I love the invitation for people to reflect and to name and celebrate what God has done. So thank you. I think what came to mind that I wanted to share is just this multifaceted and unfolding invitation the Lord has given me to be present where my feet are. And I think it's fun that one of your opening questions was just around all the senses, because I think that when I think of presence, it's really like all of it, fully there, where your feet are, engaged, awake, aware, all of those words. And so I definitely haven't arrived. Like I said, it's multifaceted and it's unfolding, but I think I'd love to just try to give a picture of what this process has looked like so far. And so I think to kind of take it back to what I would say was the beginning of this awareness, I was standing in my kitchen. It was a couple of years ago. It was in the middle of winter. I live in Colorado, so it was like kind of gross outside. The sun, actually, where I live, the sun comes out often, but the sun was not out that day, and that was a problem for me. I depend on the sun. And I had 2 kiddos homesick, and I just remember standing at the kitchen, washing dishes, and just thinking like, by design, I'm an ideas person. I'm a visionary. I'm a pioneer. I love to move into new things. And in that season, I was just kind of like restless in the job that I was in and, being home with sick kids, and it was cold outside. And I just remember feeling this like angst, and a song came on, and the song was by the Porter's Gate. It was called Centering Prayer. And the opening line is, I want to be where my feet are. And I heard that and I just started weeping because I thought, man, that actually is the cry of my heart. For as much as I'm like wrestling to be present in my actual reality where my feet are today, that is actually the cry of my heart. And I think that just really awakened me to this realization that for most of my life, I would say I probably have not been very present. And I think that there's so many elements to that. Like I said, by design, in good ways, I'm a visionary. I'm kind of future focused. I have a lot of ideas, excitable. And alongside that, I had some things happen in childhood that were pretty traumatic. I had some abuse that happened, and a pretty common thing for kiddos that have something like that happen to them is that they go very cerebral. They kind of like I don't know. I don't want this to sound weird, but they're just kind of like not inhabiting their body anymore. They're just kind of cerebral. They think, they're very vigilant. There's just a lot. They kind of shut down a lot of the senses that their body is giving them so that they can feel safe and kind of move forward. So I think that was a big piece of it too. But several years ago, kind of before this moment at the kitchen sink, the Lord, like in his kindness to me, started a pretty substantial healing process for a lot of that. And then once that moment happened at the kitchen sink, I think I just kind of realized like, wow, presence is really something that I think the Lord is inviting me into. And I think it matters. I think it matters to accept this invitation and move towards that. And I can remember walking with a friend a couple of weeks later and just recounting to her this moment I had at the sink that, you know, I want to be present where my feet are. And what does it even mean? And how do I do that, Lord? And, you know, it's interesting, Danielle, because that kind of started a season of just trying to be more aware, more intentional. Mm-hmm. I remember kind of a follow-up to that was I was reading in Acts through the summer after that, and I came across this specific verse that just arrested my attention. It was about Lydia, and it was about how Lydia was gathered and Paul came to speak to them. And then it says, and the Lord opened her heart to pay attention. Mm-hmm. And that just hit me right in the heart. And I thought, man, Lord, yes, I want to have a heart that is open to pay attention. And so I would say between those two things, it's just really been a process of learning what it is to be present to God, present to myself, and present to others, and to see his omni-rational kindness to me and through me in that sought presence. And I had, I guess, to just kind of give one more story around how I've seen this being meaningful. I mean, this has been meaningful in so many ways, right? Like being present to who comes to mind and reaching out to them for them to say, wow, incredible that you thought of me right then because I really needed a friend. Mm-hmm. Or this is kind of silly, but being present to myself. Like my husband grew up in Chicago. I grew up in Texas. Okay. And it used to be like a running joke in our family that I would like maybe become a little irritable or something. And I'd realize I was cold and he would be like, put on some socks. And I'm like, what? Yeah. But I mean, and this is like such a silly example, but like even being present to the fact that like, I need to put on socks because my feet are cold. Like, yes. And that sounds laughable, but yeah. So this presence has been significant in so many ways. But I think there's a couple of stories that feel really important. Mm-hmm. One of them is, so the friend that I had the opportunity to walk with, had the opportunity to share, like, man, I feel like the Lord is saying, be present where your feet are. I really want to dig into that. I want to follow him in that leading. We found out a few months later that friend had stage 4 colorectal cancer. And then, or stage 4 colon cancer that had spread. Yeah. And then over the next year, I walked with her in a very present way through that journey, and then was able to sit with her the night before she went back to be with the Lord. And so I'm so grateful for the invitation into presence for that season specifically, for what it did in my heart, for what it did, I think, for my friend. But also another story that comes quickly to mind is that I recently had an opportunity to go on a bit of a personal pilgrimage. I flew into Nashville, drove up to a retreat center in Kentucky. The Abbey of Gethsemane is what it's called. And while I was there, it was a silent retreat, which I'm a verbal person. So that was a really interesting experience, but a very sweet experience. And it really felt like a culmination of this seeking presence with the Lord, seeking presence with myself. And there was one of the reasons I wanted to go there specifically is there's a collection of statues of the disciples sleeping in the garden, and then Jesus in a posture of grief as he's like praying and crying out to the Father in the garden. And so seeing those statues, the walk to those statues was something I did every single day. And on the last full day that I had there, I wanted to go to the statues by myself because I had some friends that were on this particular trip too. And I started out, and I'm an input person, so I will often listen to podcasts, listen to music, things like that as I go about my day. It's very common. But as I did that, I just had this sense like, no, I want to be fully present. I want to be able to hear. I want to be aware of the smells. I want to just take this in. And And so I started down the path, noticed a lot because I was like intentioned to be present. And then I came upon this little hut that they have. I think it's called like a monastic shelter. I think that it's supposed to be if there's like a torrential downpour or some kind of inclement weather, you can tuck away in this little hut. But the hut is kind of covered on the inside with people's words and art and prayers. And it's kind of like part of the pilgrimage up to the statues. And I really wanted to stop in and kind of spend some time praying in there. And I walked in and started looking, kind of reading the prayers, things like that. And I threw my bag down on a chair and I immediately heard this like very quiet, but unmistakable rattle. And I grew up in Texas and I immediately knew that it was a rattlesnake. And Danielle, I cannot tell you how fast I jumped out of that little hut because it was like coiled right at my feet. And feels,
yeah.
And honestly, like I jumped out and I kind of had to linger because my bag was still in there. And so it was this whole thing of like, if you don't know anything about rattlesnakes, they're like actually really dangerous. And this one was on the smaller side, so I didn't know if it was like a baby or a younger one. And they can be even more dangerous because they don't let go once they bite. And so their venom can be really dangerous. And honestly, I just almost immediately upon that experience, I did get my bag back. Everything was fine. Almost immediately after that experience, I was just so sober to the fact of like, wow, presence actually did save my life. Like it actually did. It was kind of counter to the way I typically engage to not be listening to something. And so I think that just really sobered me to like, man, Lord, presence, gosh, over the past few years, you've shown me the delight that comes with presence, right? You've shown me how meaningful and why it matters to other people, but then also just for my own sense of what you're doing and your protection of me, like being present really matters. And so, like I said, multifaceted, unfolding, but it's been a cool journey and I'm excited to continue it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Heather, that's so good. There's like so much depth to your words. I think anyone can really connect to this idea of presence in so many different capacities. I love that you took us through different areas. For somebody who is just listening and they're just like, okay, I recognize that maybe there's some areas I need to be more present, but how do I do that? What are some like handholds that would help us to be more aware?
I would say I really think there's probably so many directions you could go with this, but for me, I think some really helpful things have been with my children. If they are talking to me, I'm looking at their face. That's one really practical thing I try to do, because if they're talking to me while I'm doing something else, it can be really easy for me to stick with whatever idea I was unfolding in my mind before they started launching into, whatever it is they're saying. So I try to look them in the face. I personally try to use my time, like my margin moments, towards something that's not a screen. So if I'm waiting at the doctor's office, I will read a book. Or if I'm waiting in the pickup line, I'll have like a magazine with me. Like I try to do things that aren't on a screen, because a screen can be so immersive. And for me personally, I just feel like the more things I can do that are analog, the more it helps me be present.
Yeah.
Something I've started doing that's actually really rewarding is I've started just handwriting cards and putting them in the mail. Even when I could just text somebody, I write them an actual card and put it in the mail.
That's so helpful. I think it just like doesn't connect over in our mind until somebody just says those things and you're like, oh yeah, like of course I could do that. You just don't recognize the way presence or non-presence is embedded into our life. You had mentioned the thing about being fully present to your body, to yourself, which I think is a great example. I mean, not to be vulgar in any sense, but I don't know what it is about myself or my daughter. Like I'd be like running around doing something. I'm like, I have to go to the bathroom, but I don't.
Right.
I have full access to bathroom capabilities, multiple floors of our home. And I still am like, oh, I'm just going to quickly get one thing done. And so when you said the thing about the socks, I was laughing because I just think, oh my gosh, I do that all the time. Or why is it do you think that we have neglected that presence of self?
I think for me, part of it is just this something that I tell myself over and over is like presence over productivity. But for me, for a lot of my life, that's been switched, right? And it's like, I really enjoy being productive.
Yeah.
Yes. I love to destroy the list I've made for myself. It just feels so good.
Yeah.
And I think by design, I am a person that has a lot of capacity. I enjoy, kind of having my hands in a few different projects and things like that. And so I think part of it is just this, I don't know, maybe feeling under the burden of producing or productivity or getting the next thing done or doing one more thing or just, yeah. So I think that's part of it for me.
You had talked about having presence for others, and I loved what you said about looking at people's faces. Another opportunity, for that is when we are out into the world, just being present. I love that you had that ability to step in for your friend when she was end of life. It's an uncomfortable, beautiful, hard portion of somebody's life, but it is also so rewarding. I was just at a lunch today with a friend, and she, as we're sitting there, the server came over and I just gave her a compliment. And because of just being present, I didn't have to say that. She just shared this whole thing about her life that what we were able to just help her in this one season and how she felt today. And so I think it is simple moments. It doesn't take a lot of time. It's just being aware of what is happening around us.
So I don't know. I'm an alliteration person. I can't remember if you said that on here or before, but I'm also an alliteration person. And I've just kind of been thinking of this term participatory presence. It's fully engaged and responsive. And whenever I first kind of started thinking through this idea of being present where my feet are, one of the first things that came to mind is just being more being present to the goodness of now, to the things in this season, to what's happening in my life around me. And so as a way to kind of actually mark that, our family created what we call the wall of wonder in our home. It's just kind of a wall that's dedicated as a landing space for the things that bring awe, delight, beauty, and wonder. And being present to that, naming it, responding in gratitude feels like worship. Yeah. But then also, like you said, to being out and about with people, it's really attuned me to seeing and celebrating, delighting in, and being grateful for the very everyday things. I was at the park the other day with my son, and as we were there, a woman came around with a leaf blower. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. This was kind of before the leaves had started falling. But Danielle, what she did is she went around the park and she blew the wood chips off of the little foam pads that are under the swings, and she put wood chips back where they go. And I was just thinking I'm sure nobody pays attention to this job, but it's actually important. It keeps kids from tripping. Yeah. It keeps this from being unkempt. It's more inviting when it's tended, and so it's just made me more aware. And then in turn, like you said, you tell people, you notice, and then you tell people and you thank them. And it's incredible what it unlocks in people to be seen and appreciated.
Mm-hmm. Lastly, you had said the words when you were going into that little hut, presence saved my life. And I think obviously with the rattlesnake, yes, he saved your life, but it's just such a bigger mindset. Presence really saves people's life. When we encounter someone, we're talking with them face to face. We are really having this holistic approach so that we can be more present to what he is having to say to us on a day-to-day basis. How has that helped you with your connection with God to really hear his still small voice because you are being present?
I think it has helped me attune to his voice instead of the noise around me, because part of presence for me has been a reduction of the noise, maybe a taking out of things that would be distracting, a purposing to stay right here where my feet are when I could worry about tomorrow or regret something from the past. So I think that in that presence, it has enabled me, when I access that, it has enabled me to like remember that his presence is with me.
Yeah.
And then when I'm looking for and expecting his presence, then I think I'm paying attention to what he's saying. So that's what I would say in part.
That's so good. Well, Heather, I have to wait at a doctor's office today. So it made me think, how am I going to be present when I sit there today? So thank you so much for this conversation. I think everybody can really like find a place to land and recognize, okay, yeah, this is the space that I can be more present in. If people wanted to get connected to you, Heather, what would be the best way that they could do that?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at HD Winchell, or Thanks for Doing That podcast.
Heather Winchell, thank you so much for being on the Parable Podcast.
Thank you.
You know, we all fall into that category at different times of our life where we don't really feel present. And so I hope this was a gentle reminder for you today to step into presence one step at a time, just like Heather did. If you want to connect with her, simply visit daniellezapchenk.com for details. And here are 2 reflection questions from our time with Heather today. Number 1, I'd love for you to journal about the current cry of your heart that maybe makes you feel restless or anxious or unaware of your actual presence in your life. Number 2, how can you step into participatory presence with just one person in your life today? Could you do me a favor and share Heather's episode with a friend or a family member who has recently told you, I just don't feel connected to myself or God or those around me? I am confident that Heather's parable will be an encouragement to them. Thank you so much to my editor-in-chief, my husband, Eric Zapchenk. We hope that you are encouraged to think about your own parable story. And remember, your parable showcases how we never have to wonder about God's presence in our own lives. We'll see you back again next week on the Parable Podcast.